On June 15th, 2019, 7-year-old twins Emma and Ethan Sullivan were playing on their backyard swing in the quiet suburb of Cedar Falls, Ohio, when they vanished without a trace. No screams, no struggle, just an empty swing still moving in the summer breeze and a small gap cut through the back fence. Their parents called police within minutes. The investigation found nothing. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no leads. Just a faint chemical smell lingering in the air and strange symbols carved into the fence post that no one could identify. The case went cold after 6 months, filed away as another unsolved child abduction in a state where dozens of children disappear every year. But what authorities didn't know was that Emma and Ethan weren't random victims. They were the 7th and 8th children taken by an organization that had been operating in plain sight for over a decade, hiding behind the facade of a religious foundation called Children of the New Dawn. And in a concrete compound hidden in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky, those children were being systematically broken down and rebuilt into something else entirely, perfect disciples for a man who believed he was preparing them for the end of the world. Detective Michael Torres had been staring at the same missing children files for 2 hours when his phone rang. As head of Hamilton County's Child Crimes Unit, he'd grown numb to cases like this. Most missing children were found within 48 hours, runaways returning home hungry and ashamed. But some never came home at all, and those were the ones that haunted him through sleepless nights and empty bottles of bourbon. "Torres," he answered, setting down his coffee mug next to a stack of cold case files that seemed to grow taller every week. "Detective, this is dispatch. We've got a possible child abduction at 1247 Maple Street in Cedar Falls. Twin children, ages 7. Parents are requesting immediate response." Torres felt the familiar knot form in his stomach. "How long have they been missing?" "Call came in 20 minutes ago. Patrol units are en route, but the parents specifically asked for child crimes." Torres grabbed his keys and badge. In his 15 years with Hamilton County Sheriff's Department, he'd learned that the first hours of a child abduction case were everything. After that, statistics turned ugly fast. The drive to Cedar Falls took him through the kind of suburban neighborhoods where American families still believed in safety. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, minivans in driveways. The kind of place where children rode bikes without helmets and parents didn't lock their doors. Torres had seen enough cases to know that evil didn't respect zip codes. 1247 Maple Street was a 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a swing set in the backyard. 3 patrol cars were already parked outside, their red and blue lights painting the neighboring houses in alternating colors of emergency. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered on sidewalks, whispering and pointing like spectators at an accident scene. Torres found the parents in their living room. David Sullivan was pacing behind the couch where his wife, Sarah, sat clutching a tissue box. Both looked to be in their mid-30s, the kind of middle-class professionals who coached Little League and attended PTA meetings. Now they looked hollow-eyed and desperate, like people whose entire world had just collapsed. "Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Detective Torres. I specialize in missing children cases." David stopped pacing. "Have you found them? Emma and Ethan?" "We're going to find them," Torres said, pulling out his notebook. "But I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Every detail you can remember." Sarah looked up from her tissue. They were playing on their swing set, right outside the kitchen window. I was making lunch and I could hear them laughing. Her voice cracked. Emma was pushing Ethan, and he was trying to jump off while it was still moving. They do that all the time. What time was this? Around noon, David said. Maybe 12:15. I was working in my home office upstairs, but I could hear them too. Then what happened? I went to call them for lunch, Sarah continued. I stepped outside and the swing was still moving, but they were gone. Just gone. Torres had heard variations of this story dozens of times. Children who vanished from their own backyards, from playgrounds, from places where parents thought they were safe. But something felt different about this case. The parents seemed genuinely shocked, not defensive, and there was something else. Did you notice anything unusual, strange smells, sounds, people in the neighborhood you didn't recognize? David and Sarah exchanged glances. There was a smell, David said slowly. Sweet, but chemical, like, I don't know how to describe it. Like cotton candy mixed with cleaning fluid, Sarah added. I noticed it when I went outside, but I thought maybe someone was doing yard work with fertilizer or something. Torres wrote this down. Chemical smells weren't uncommon in abduction cases: chloroform, ether, other substances used to subdue victims. What about the fence? Any damage to your property? That's the weird thing, David said. There's a hole cut in our back fence, a small one, like someone used wire cutters. But it wasn't there yesterday. I'm sure of it. Torres followed them through the kitchen to the backyard. The swing set sat in the center of a well-maintained lawn, one swing still moving slightly in the breeze. The back fence was a standard 6-foot privacy fence that separated the Sullivan property from a wheat field owned by a local farmer. At the base of the fence, Torres found what he was looking for. A gap about 2 feet wide had been cut through the wooden slats, the cut ends still showing fresh wood. Beyond the fence, he could see tire tracks in the soft earth of the wheat field, wide tires, probably from a van or SUV. But what made his blood run cold were the marks carved into the fence post beside the gap. Symbols that looked almost like letters, but not from any alphabet Torres recognized. 3 marks carved deep into the wood. A circle with a line through it, 2 curved lines intersecting, and what looked like a simplified drawing of an eye. Torres had seen those symbols before, 6 months ago, at another missing child scene in neighboring Warren County, and 8 months before that, in Butler County. Different children, different families, but the same symbols, the same chemical smell, the same precision in the fence cutting. His phone buzzed with a text from his partner, Detective Lisa Chen. Got the AMBER alert ready. Need photos and descriptions. Torres photographed the symbols in the gap in the fence. As he worked, he noticed something else: footprints in the soft dirt near the fence. Small ones that belonged to children, and larger ones that definitely belonged to adults. Multiple adults. This wasn't a random abduction. This was planned, coordinated, and professional. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, Torres called out, I need you to think carefully. Has anyone approached your children recently? Strangers asking questions, people taking unusual interest in your family? David shook his head. Nothing like that. Emma and Ethan are pretty shy around strangers anyway. What about religious organizations? Anyone from churches or community groups who might have contacted you? Sarah frowned. Actually, yes. Last month, a woman came to the door. She said she was from some kind of children's foundation. Children of the New Dawn, I think. She wanted to talk about after-school programs and summer camps. Torres felt his pulse quicken. Did you give her any information? Just basic stuff. The kids' ages, that they were twins. I wasn't really interested, but she was very persistent. Kept talking about gifted children and special opportunities. Do you remember what she looked like? Older woman, maybe 60, very well dressed, professional. She had this way of talking that made everything sound important, like she was letting us in on some secret. Torres made notes. Did she leave any materials, business cards, brochures? She left a pamphlet, David said. But we threw it away. Should we have kept it? It's okay. We might be able to recover it from your trash if the pickup hasn't come yet. Torres called for a forensics team to process the backyard scene. While they waited, he walked the perimeter of the property, looking for any other signs of surveillance or planning. Professional child abductors often spent weeks studying their targets, learning routines and schedules. In the front yard, he found confirmation of his suspicions. Cigarette butts under a large oak tree across the street, positioned with a clear view of the Sullivan house. The butts were relatively fresh, maybe a week old. Someone had been watching this family. His phone rang. Detective Chen. Mike, I ran the description through the system. Emma and Ethan Sullivan aren't the first twins to go missing in Ohio this year. Torres felt ice form in his stomach. How many others? 2 other sets. March in Columbus, May in Toledo, all between ages 6 and 8, all taken from their own backyards, all with the same MO, gaps cut in fences, chemical smells, no witnesses. Same symbols. Columbus PD found similar markings. Toledo didn't mention any, but I'm calling them now. Torres looked back at the Sullivan house where David and Sarah stood in their doorway, waiting for news about their children. 6 children, 3 sets of twins, all taken by what was clearly an organized group with specific preferences and professional methods. Lisa, I need you to contact the FBI. This isn't a local case anymore. We're looking at interstate trafficking. Already on it. Agent Rodriguez from the Cincinnati field office is driving down. Good. And Lisa, run a check on Children of the New Dawn. Some woman from that organization approached the Sullivans last month asking about their kids. Religious front? That's what I'm thinking. Classic predator cover. Approach families through children's programs, identify targets, gather intelligence. Torres hung up and walked back to the house. The forensics team had arrived and was processing the backyard scene. Soon, this quiet suburban street would be crawling with investigators, reporters, and federal agents. But by then, Emma and Ethan Sullivan would be hundreds of miles away if his theory was correct. The question wasn't whether they'd been taken by a trafficking organization. The question was whether Torres and his team could find them before those children disappeared forever into a network that had been operating successfully for years. As he watched the crime scene technicians photograph the carved symbols, Torres made a silent promise to the Sullivan family. He would find Emma and Ethan, and he would destroy the organization that had taken them. But first, he had to figure out where Children of the New Dawn was hiding 6 missing children in a country with over 3 million square miles of territory. The investigation was just beginning. Chapter 2. Patterns FBI Special Agent Maria Rodriguez arrived at the Sullivan house 90 minutes after Torres's call. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of sharp focus that came from years of hunting predators who specialized in the worst crimes imaginable. Detective Torres. I'm Agent Rodriguez from the Cincinnati field office. I've been tracking cases similar to this across the Midwest. They shook hands in the Sullivan driveway. Behind them, forensics techs were still processing the backyard, and a news van had appeared at the end of the street, despite Torres's efforts to keep the media away. How similar? Torres asked. Rodriguez opened a tablet and showed him a map of Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia. Red pins marked locations across all 4 states. 19 missing children in the past 2 years, all between ages 6 and 10, all taken from residential areas, all with the same signature elements. Torres counted the pins. 19 kids. Jesus. It gets worse. The pattern suggests they're not keeping the children in one location. We think they move them frequently through a network of facilities. What kind of facilities? That's what we're trying to figure out. We've identified shell companies, fake religious organizations, and several properties purchased through complex financial arrangements designed to hide the real owners. Rodriguez showed him photographs of other crime scenes, gaps cut in fences, strange symbols carved into wood, tire tracks leading to rural roads. The similarities were unmistakable. "Agent Rodriguez," Torres said, "the Sullivans mentioned a woman from Children of the New Dawn who approached them last month. Any intel on that organization?" Rodriguez's expression darkened. "That's our primary lead. Children of the New Dawn is registered as a religious education foundation in Kentucky. Clean paperwork, filed taxes, even has a website promoting after-school programs and summer camps. But when we tried to investigate their physical locations, we kept hitting dead ends." "Dead ends? How?" "Addresses that don't exist. Phone numbers that go to voicemail boxes that are never checked. Directors who can't be located. It's a very sophisticated front operation." Torres felt pieces clicking together. "Professional human trafficking organization using religious cover to identify and select targets." "That's our working theory. The woman who contacted the Sullivans matches descriptions from other families. Always well-dressed, always talks about gifted children and special opportunities, always gathers detailed information about family routines and children's schedules." They walked back toward the house where the Sullivans waited. Torres could see the desperation in their faces, the way parents looked when they realized their children might be gone forever. "Agent Rodriguez, what's the recovery rate for cases like this?" She was quiet for a moment. "If we find them within 72 hours, chances are good. After that..." She didn't finish the sentence, but Torres understood. Emma and Ethan Sullivan had been missing for 4 hours. Back at the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department, Torres and Rodriguez set up a command post in the conference room. Detective Chen had pulled files on the other missing twin cases from Columbus and Toledo, and the similarities were chilling. "Look at this," Chen said, spreading photographs across the table. "Same age range, same family profiles, same abduction methods. But there's something else." She pointed to family photos from each case. "All the families are middle-class professionals, two-parent households, stable incomes, children involved in extracurricular activities. These aren't random targets." Rodriguez studied the files. "They're selecting specific types of families, probably looking for children who won't be missed immediately, not runaways or kids from broken homes, but children from stable situations who won't draw immediate suspicion if they disappear during what looks like family activities." Torres examined crime scene photos from the Columbus case. March 15th. Twin boys, age 8, taken from their backyard while parents were inside preparing dinner. Same fence cutting, same chemical smell. Toledo case was May 3rd, Chen added. Twin girls, age 6, taken while playing in their sandbox. Parents found the same carved symbols. "So we're looking at a timeline," Rodriguez said. "March, May, June. They're accelerating their operations." Torres felt a chill. "Which means they're either getting bolder or they're running out of time for something." His phone rang. The caller ID showed Hamilton County Coroner's Office. "Torres." "Detective, this is Dr. Patricia Walsh. I need you to come down here immediately. We found something in the evidence from the Sullivan case that you need to see." The Hamilton County Coroner's Office occupied the basement level of the county building. Dr. Walsh met Torres and Rodriguez in the main examination room, where she'd laid out evidence bags from the Sullivan backyard. "I've been analyzing the chemical residue from the fence area," Dr. Walsh said, pulling on latex gloves. "The smell the parents described? It's not chloroform or ether like we initially thought." She opened an evidence bag containing soil samples. It's a compound I've never seen before in an abduction case. Combination of synthetic pheromones and mild hallucinogens. Hallucinogens? Rodriguez asked. Low-grade stuff probably wouldn't cause unconsciousness, but it would make children compliant and disoriented, very sophisticated. Someone with chemistry knowledge formulated this. Torres felt his stomach tighten. So the children were conscious when they were taken? Probably, but they would have been confused, docile, easier to control. The pheromone component might have made them more trusting of strangers. Rodriguez made notes. This supports the professional trafficking theory. Most child abductors use crude methods, force, simple drugs, intimidation. This level of sophistication suggests scientific knowledge and significant resources. Dr. Walsh pulled out another evidence bag. There's something else. The symbols carved into the fence post. They're not random marks. She showed them high-resolution photographs of the carved symbols under magnification. These are runic symbols, but not from any traditional alphabet. They're modern variations, probably created specifically for this organization. What do they mean? I consulted with a linguistics professor at UC. His preliminary translation suggests they're markers indicating successful target acquisition. Basically, they're keeping score. Torres stared at the symbols. 3 marks representing 3 successful abductions in Hamilton County. Somewhere, other fence posts bore similar marks for the 19 missing children Rodriguez had identified. Dr. Walsh, is there any way to trace the chemical compound? I'm working on that. The precursor chemicals are regulated, so if someone's purchasing them in quantities large enough for multiple abductions, there should be purchase records. Rodriguez's phone buzzed. She checked the message and her face went pale. We just got word from Kentucky State Police. They found an abandoned van matching our BOLO alert about 30 miles south of Louisville, near the Daniel Boone National Forest. Torres grabbed his keys. Any sign of the children? The van was clean, but they found more of those carved symbols on the dashboard. And something else, religious pamphlets from Children of the New Dawn, and what appears to be a map of rural Kentucky with several locations marked. The drive to Kentucky took 2 hours through rolling hills and dense forests. The abandoned van had been found on a dirt road that led deep into the national forest, far from any main highways or populated areas. Kentucky State Police had secured the scene. Detective Sarah Morrison, a 20-year veteran with graying hair and tired eyes, met them at the command post. Van was discovered by hunters around noon, Morrison said. Ran the plates, stolen from a church parking lot in Indianapolis 3 weeks ago. Torres examined the van. It had been thoroughly cleaned, but forensics techs were still finding trace evidence. The carved symbols on the dashboard were identical to those found at the abduction scenes. Detective Morrison, any theories about why they abandoned it here? Transfer point, Morrison said. This area has dozens of old logging roads and mining trails. Perfect place to switch vehicles without being seen. We found tire tracks from at least 2 other vehicles. Rodriguez studied the map found in the van. Several locations were marked with red X's, all in remote areas of eastern Kentucky. These coordinates, do any of them correspond to known properties? We're checking now. But this part of Kentucky is full of abandoned mining operations, old churches, defunct camps. Lots of places to hide. Torres felt the familiar frustration of chasing ghosts. Every lead seemed to evaporate just when they thought they were getting close. Any chance we can get search helicopters in the air? Already requested, Morrison said. But it's getting dark, and we've got maybe 2 hours of good searching light left. As if summoned by her words, the sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the forest. Two Kentucky State Police helicopters appeared over the tree line, their searchlights beginning to sweep the mountainous terrain. Rodriguez's phone rang. She walked away to take the call, but Torres could see her expression growing increasingly tense. When she returned, her face was grim. That was our analyst at Quantico. They've been tracking financial records related to Children of the New Dawn, and they found something disturbing. What kind of something? The organization has been receiving large cash payments from overseas accounts, payments that correspond to the timeline of the child abductions. Torres felt ice in his veins. You're saying someone's paying them for the children. That's exactly what I'm saying. This isn't just domestic trafficking. We're looking at an international market for American children. The implications hit Torres like a physical blow. Emma and Ethan Sullivan weren't just missing. They were merchandise in a global network that treated children like commodities. As darkness fell over the Kentucky mountains, Torres realized they weren't just racing against time to find 6 missing children. They were racing to prevent those children from disappearing into a system designed to make them vanish forever. Somewhere in these mountains, or somewhere far beyond them, Emma and Ethan Sullivan were waiting for rescue that might never come. Unless Torres and his team could unravel a conspiracy that reached much further than anyone had imagined. The search helicopters swept their lights across the forest canopy, but Torres knew that by morning the children might be thousands of miles away, and the people who had taken them were already planning their next acquisition. 24 hours after Emma and Ethan Sullivan disappeared, Torres received the call that changed everything. Detective Torres? This is Dr. Rebecca Chen, pediatric psychologist at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Torres was in his car, driving back from Kentucky after the van search had yielded no additional leads. Dr. Chen, what can I do for you? I have a patient who might be connected to your missing children case. A 7-year-old girl named Sophie Martinez. She was brought in 3 weeks ago by her grandmother after being found wandering on a highway near Lexington. Torres pulled over to the side of the road. Found wandering? Sophie was severely malnourished and showed signs of prolonged psychological trauma. She's been largely nonverbal since her arrival, but yesterday she started talking about the White Room and Brother David. More importantly, she drew pictures of other children, including what appears to be twins. I'll be right there. Cincinnati Children's Hospital was a maze of corridors and elevators that eventually led Torres to the pediatric psychiatric wing. Dr. Chen met him at the nurses' station, a small, intense woman with kind eyes and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much childhood trauma. Sophie's grandmother reported her missing from their home in Bowling Green 6 months ago, Dr. Chen explained as they walked toward the patient rooms. Police assumed she was a runaway, but her psychological profile doesn't fit that pattern. What does fit? Extended captivity with systematic psychological conditioning. Someone was trying to break down her personality and rebuild it. They stopped outside a room with large windows and child-friendly decorations. Inside, a small girl with dark hair sat at a table covered with crayons and paper. She was drawing intently, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. Sophie, Dr. Chen said gently as they entered. This is Detective Torres. He's trying to help some other children who might be in the same place you were. Sophie looked up. Her eyes were older than 7, filled with a wariness that children shouldn't possess. She studied Torres for a moment, then returned to her drawing. Can you tell me about the place where you were kept? Torres asked, sitting down across from her. Sophie continued drawing, but began talking in a whisper. The White Room had no windows. Brother David said windows let in bad thoughts. We had to wear white clothes and eat white food. Rice and milk and bread with no crust. She held up her drawing. It showed a large rectangular building with no windows and several small figures in white clothing standing in rows. This is where the chosen children live. Torres felt his pulse quicken. How many children were there? Lots. Maybe 20. Brother David said we were special, that our families didn't want us anymore, but he would take care of us forever. Sophie, do you remember seeing any twins? 2 children who looked exactly alike? Her eyes widened. The new ones came 3 days before I ran away. Emma and Ethan. They cried a lot the first night. Brother David said they needed more white medicine to help them forget. Torres exchanged glances with Dr. Chen. White medicine? They put it in our food, made everything fuzzy, made it hard to remember home. Sophie picked up a red crayon. But I never forgot Grandma Maria. That's why I could run away when they left the door unlocked. She began drawing another picture, this one showing a man in robes standing in front of children arranged in neat rows. This is Brother David. He said he was preparing us for ascension. Ascension? When the world ends, the chosen children will go to heaven with him. But first, we have to forget everything from before. Forget our names, forget our families, forget everything except what Brother David teaches us. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Sophie, can you remember anything about where this place was, what you could see outside? Mountains, lots of trees, and there was a big cross on top of the building that lit up at night. Red light. Torres made notes. A compound in the mountains with the illuminated cross. That was something helicopters could spot from the air. Was there anything else? Roads, other buildings, anything that might help us find this place? Sophie was quiet for a long time, concentrating on her drawing. Finally, she looked up. There were trucks that came at night. Big trucks with pictures on the sides. What kind of pictures? Food pictures, like delivery trucks, but they didn't bring food, they brought new children, and sometimes... Her voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes they took children away. Torres felt sick. Where did they take them? Brother David said they went to other schools, better schools where they could help teach other chosen children. But the kids who left, they looked scared. The pieces were forming a horrifying picture. A compound in the Kentucky mountains where children were being systematically brainwashed and then distributed to other locations or possibly sold to international buyers. Sophie, do you think you could help us find this place? If we showed you maps or flew over the area? She nodded solemnly. I want to help Emma and Ethan. They were nice to me. Emma shared her blanket when I was cold. Within 2 hours, Torres had assembled a joint task force, including FBI agents, Kentucky State Police, and specialized child recovery units. Sophie's information had given them their first real lead in over 24 hours. The search focused on a 50-square-mile area of the Daniel Boone National Forest, where several abandoned religious camps and mining operations provided potential hiding places for a compound matching Sophie's description. Agent Rodriguez coordinated the helicopter search from Kentucky State Police headquarters, while Torres remained with Sophie in Cincinnati, hoping she might remember additional details that could narrow their search area. At 3:47 p.m., the breakthrough came. Command, this is Air Unit 3, came the voice over the radio. We've got a possible match approximately 15 miles northeast of the van recovery site. Large building with illuminated cross, multiple outbuildings, recent vehicle activity. Torres felt adrenaline surge through his system. Any sign of children? Negative on visual contact with children, but there are multiple vehicles present and what appears to be recent construction activity. Rodriguez's voice cut through the radio chatter. All ground units, converge on coordinates being transmitted now. Approach with extreme caution. We don't know how many adults are on site or what kind of weapons they might have. Torres wanted to be there for the raid, but Sophie was their only witness, and he couldn't leave her. Instead, he stayed glued to the radio as tactical teams surrounded the compound that had held dozens of children captive. Command, we have visual confirmation of the target building. Illuminated Red Cross matches witness description preparing to breach. The wait was agonizing. Torres paced the hospital room while Sophie continued drawing, seemingly unaware that her information was leading to the rescue she'd dreamed about for months. Finally, Rodriguez's voice crackled through. Building secured. We have recovered 18 children, ages 6 through 12. All appear to be alive but will require immediate medical attention. Torres felt relief flood through him, followed immediately by a spike of fear. Emma and Ethan Sullivan. Affirmative. The Sullivan twins are here, conscious and responsive. Torres closed his eyes and said a silent prayer of thanks. After 36 hours of hell, David and Sarah Sullivan would have their children back. But Rodriguez's next transmission made his blood run cold. Torres, we've got a problem. The man calling himself Brother David is nowhere to be found, and we discovered evidence that children were transported from this location as recently as yesterday. This compound was part of a much larger network. The Appalachian Children's Rescue Center had been designed to look like a religious retreat. Rustic cabins arranged around a central meeting hall, all nestled in a valley surrounded by dense forest. From the air, it appeared to be exactly what its fake permits claimed: a summer camp for underprivileged children. But Torres, arriving at the scene 4 hours after the raid, could see the truth in the details that helicopters had missed. The windows of the children's dormitories had been painted black from the inside. The meeting hall was actually a windowless warehouse with rooms that looked like prison cells, and the kitchen contained industrial-sized containers of psychotropic medications disguised as vitamins. Agent Rodriguez met him at the compound entrance. She looked exhausted, but grimly satisfied. 18 children recovered, she reported. Ages 6 to 12, all showing signs of prolonged captivity and psychological conditioning. The medical team is evaluating them now, but they're alive. What about Emma and Ethan? Physically unharmed, but they've been heavily drugged. The compounds in their system match what Dr. Walsh found at the abduction scene, plus several other substances designed to impair memory and induce compliance. Torres followed her through the compound. Each building revealed new horrors: isolation chambers where children had been kept in sensory deprivation, conditioning rooms with restraint equipment, and a medical facility stocked with enough psychotropic drugs to control a small army. The man running this operation called himself Brother David, but his real name is David Kellerman, Rodriguez continued. Former military psychologist discharged in 2018 for unauthorized human experimentation. Apparently, he became convinced that the world was ending and that he needed to prepare chosen children for the apocalypse. Where is he now? Gone, along with his core staff and apparently several children who aren't among the ones we recovered. Based on evidence in his office, he's been running a network of similar facilities across multiple states. They entered the main building where Torres got his first look at the rescued children. 18 kids sitting on cots, all wearing identical white clothing, all with the same vacant expression Sophie had possessed when she first arrived at the hospital. Some were younger than Emma and Ethan, others approaching adolescence. All had been stolen from families and subjected to months or years of systematic brainwashing. Emma and Ethan Sullivan sat together on a cot near the back of the room. When they saw Torres, Emma's face brightened slightly, the first sign of personality he'd seen from any of the children. "Are you here to take us home?" she asked in a whisper. "Yes," Torres said, kneeling down to their level. "Your mom and dad are flying here right now. They've been looking for you every minute since you disappeared." Ethan, who hadn't spoken, suddenly burst into tears. "Brother David said they didn't want us anymore. He said they gave us away because we were bad." Torres felt rage burn in his chest at what these monsters had done to innocent children. "That's not true, Ethan. Your parents love you very much. They never stopped looking for you." Dr. Patricia Vance, the child psychologist brought in for the rescue operation, approached them. "Detective Torres, we need to prepare the families for what they're going to see. These children have been through systematic psychological trauma. Recovery is going to be a long process." "How long?" "Months, maybe years. Some of them don't remember their real names. Others have been convinced that their families abandoned them. It's going to take intensive therapy to help them separate reality from the conditioning they've received." Torres looked around the room at 18 broken children who should have been playing in their backyards, attending school, living normal lives. Instead, they'd been turned into victims of a conspiracy that treated them like objects to be programmed and sold. "Dr. Vance, we found evidence that other children were transported from this location recently. Children who aren't here." Her expression darkened. "How many?" "We're not sure, but Kellerman's records suggest he's been operating this network for over 3 years. The children we recovered today represent only one location." Rodriguez joined them, carrying a laptop and several file folders. "Torres, you need to see what we found in Kellerman's office. This operation is bigger than we imagined." The laptop contained detailed records of child acquisitions, transfers, and what appeared to be financial transactions with overseas accounts. Kellerman had been meticulous in his documentation, treating the children like inventory in a warehouse system. "Look at this," Rodriguez said, pointing to a spreadsheet. "He's been tracking over 200 children through his network over the past 3 years. Different facilities in Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Ohio. Some marked as graduated to overseas placement, others transferred between locations, and some—" She paused. "Some what?" "Some are marked as failed conditioning with a notation that just says disposed." Torres felt sick. Kellerman hadn't just been kidnapping and brainwashing children. He'd been killing the ones who didn't respond to his psychological manipulation. "How many facilities are we talking about?" Rodriguez pulled up a map on the laptop. Red pins marked locations across 4 states. "At least 7 active compounds based on these records, each one designed to hold 20 to 30 children." Torres did the math. If each facility was at capacity, they were looking at over 200 missing children currently being held in conditions similar to what they'd found at the Appalachian Center. "We need to coordinate simultaneous raids," Torres said. "If Kellerman escaped from here, he's probably warning the other facilities right now." Already in motion, FBI field offices in all 4 states are mobilizing tactical teams. But Torres, there's something else. Rodriguez pulled out a printed email from the laptop. Kellerman was corresponding with international contacts about overseas placement of children. Look at this message from 2 days ago. Torres read the email, his horror growing with each line. Kellerman had been negotiating the sale of specific children to buyers in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, with prices ranging from $50,000 to $100,000 per child, depending on age, physical characteristics, and psychological conditioning level. Emma and Ethan Sullivan had been specifically requested by a buyer in Romania who wanted American twins, ages 6 to 8, suitable for domestic placement. "We stopped this just in time," Rodriguez said quietly. According to the email chain, the Sullivan twins were scheduled for transport overseas tomorrow. Torres looked back at Emma and Ethan, who were now being examined by paramedics. In less than 24 hours, those children would have been on a plane to Romania, sold to someone who saw them as property rather than human beings. Agent Rodriguez, when we raid the other facilities, what are the chances we'll find Kellerman? Minimal. He's had several hours to evacuate, and his records show multiple safe houses and contingency plans. This was a professional operation with extensive resources and planning. Torres realized they'd won a battle, but not the war. They'd rescued 18 children, but David Kellerman and his core organization were still operating. And somewhere, at facilities they hadn't yet located, more children were being held, conditioned, and prepared for sale to the highest bidder. As medical teams began transporting the rescued children to hospitals for evaluation and treatment, Torres made a promise to himself. He would find every child in Kellerman's network. He would shut down every facility. And he would make sure David Kellerman never had the opportunity to harm another child. But first, he had to call David and Sarah Sullivan with news they'd been praying to hear for 36 hours. Their children were coming home. The war against Kellerman's network was far from over, but tonight, 18 families would be reunited with children they thought they might never see again. And sometimes, Torres reflected, that was enough to keep fighting. Over the next 6 hours, the coordinated raids across 4 states yielded mixed results. FBI tactical teams successfully stormed 5 additional compounds, recovering a total of 127 children in various stages of psychological conditioning. But Kellerman himself remained elusive, apparently having escaped through a network of safe houses that had been planned years in advance. At the main Kentucky compound, Torres watched as Emma and Ethan Sullivan were reunited with their parents in the parking lot of the local hospital. David Sullivan fell to his knees as his children ran toward him, and Sarah wrapped all 3 of them in a fierce embrace that seemed to last forever. "Detective Torres," Sarah called out through her tears. Thank you for bringing them home." But Torres knew the homecoming was just the beginning of a long healing process. Emma and Ethan would need months of therapy to overcome the psychological conditioning they'd endured. Some of the other rescued children had been in Kellerman's custody for over 2 years and had forgotten their original names entirely. Dr. Patricia Vance pulled Torres aside as the Sullivan family prepared to leave for Cincinnati Children's Hospital. "Detective, you should know what we're dealing with," she said quietly. Kellerman's conditioning techniques were extremely sophisticated. Military-grade psychological manipulation combined with pharmaceutical interventions. Some of these children may never fully recover their pre-abduction personalities. Torres felt a wave of rage at the systematic destruction of innocent minds. What about Emma and Ethan? They were only captive for 36 hours. They're young, resilient, and the exposure was brief. With proper treatment, they should make a full recovery, but they'll always carry some memory of what happened to them. As Torres drove back to Cincinnati that night, he reflected on the victory they'd achieved. 127 children rescued, a major trafficking network disrupted, and multiple arrests made. By any measure, it was a successful operation, but David Kellerman was still free, along with his core associates. And Torres knew that men like Kellerman didn't simply disappear. They regrouped, relocated, and started over somewhere else. His phone rang as he crossed the Ohio state line. "Torres." "Detective, this is Agent Rodriguez. We just got word from Interpol. They've identified Kellerman boarding a flight to Eastern Europe 12 hours ago, using a false passport." Torres felt frustration burn in his chest. So he's gone. For now, but we've alerted international law enforcement, and we're working with Romanian authorities who are expecting to receive the Sullivan twins. There's a good chance we can track him down. What about his operation here? Any chance it's still active? We've dismantled the known facilities, but his financial records show payments to additional shell companies we haven't identified yet. This network was much larger than what we've uncovered so far. Torres realized that saving 127 children was just the beginning. Somewhere, other facilities were still operating, other children were still being held, and other predators were still using legitimate organizations as fronts for their crimes. Agent Rodriguez, I want to stay involved in this investigation. Even if Kellerman is overseas, his network is still here. I was hoping you'd say that. The Bureau is setting up a permanent task force focused on international child trafficking. We could use someone with your experience. Torres thought about Emma and Ethan Sullivan, about Sophie Martinez, about the 18 children he'd seen sitting in that compound wearing identical white clothing with vacant eyes. He thought about the families who'd spent months or years not knowing what had happened to their children. Count me in. Detective Michael Torres stood in the parking lot of Cincinnati Children's Hospital, watching as Emma and Ethan Sullivan ran toward their parents' car. 6 months of intensive therapy had helped restore much of what David Kellerman had tried to steal from them, though they still had nightmares and struggled with trust issues. But they were laughing again, playing again, being children again. The raid on Kellerman's network had ultimately recovered 127 children from 7 facilities across 4 states. David Kellerman himself had been captured 3 weeks later at a safe house in West Virginia, along with 12 of his core associates. All were facing federal charges of kidnapping, human trafficking, and child abuse. The trial would last months, possibly years. But Torres knew that justice was finally being served. His phone buzzed with a text from Agent Rodriguez. New case in Indiana. Missing siblings, ages 7 and 9. Similar MO. Could be copycat or remaining network members. Torres sighed and got in his car. The work never ended. Somewhere, other children needed rescue, other families needed closure, other monsters needed to be stopped. But as he drove away from the hospital, Torres allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Emma and Ethan Sullivan were home. Sophie Martinez was thriving with her grandmother. 127 children had been saved from a nightmare that most people couldn't even imagine. In the war against those who preyed on children, victories were measured one rescue at a time, and Torres would keep fighting, one case at a time, until no child had to suffer what the Sullivan twins had endured. The radio crackled with a new call. Detective Torres, we have a possible child abduction in Hamilton County. Torres reached for his radio. The work continued. But somewhere in Cincinnati, Emma Sullivan was teaching her brother Ethan how to ride a bike without training wheels. And that was worth every sleepless night, every dangerous raid, and every mile driven in pursuit of monsters who thought children were nothing more than merchandise. The network was broken. The children were safe. And Michael Torres was already planning his next move in a war that would never truly end, but could be won one child at a time.